Call this meeting of the Finance Committee of the Georgia Senate to order. We are one short of a quorum. I know we've got a member that is presenting a bill in another committee. I'm not sure about the rest of them. Maybe they just don't show up. I don't know, but no, I'm just, anyway, we'll have Senator Thompson, who shares Bartow County with me, do our invocation. You're number four? Three.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you bow your heads, please. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you for the privilege to be able to serve the people of Georgia. Lord, we thank you to live in a state that is as free as it comes. And we're just thankful, Lord, as people continue to flock to our state for all the different reasons that, Lord, we make sure that we give you the glory and the praise for that. Lord, I pray that you be with us today as we consider this legislation. Give us wisdom and discernment, and we give you all the praise in your name. Amen.
And I should add that one's also not here today, so I can vouch for two of them now anyway. So, all right. So the first bill that we're going to hear is Senate Bill 361. That's Senator Walker is the sponsor of that bill. And if you want to come up here and present it or at the podium, whatever you're comfortable with, and then tell us how you'd like to proceed. I know there's some other people that want to speak on behalf of this as well. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Appreciate you all putting this on your agenda today. I'm very, very excited about this legislation. It's a real privilege for me to be able to carry it. It's an idea from the Lieutenant Governor. It is a issue that we have struggled with over the years here in the legislature to try to figure out a way to help our local law enforcement with some funding. This is a creative measure to be able to allow the private sector to do that. And it's modeled after the Lieutenant Governor's rural hospital tax credit legislation that he got passed when he served in the House. It's LC 432238S, Senate Bill 361, entitled the Law Enforcement Strategic Support Act. The Less Crime Act provides a state tax credit for individual taxpayers and businesses that want to contribute to their local police department or sheriff's office through a foundation that the law enforcement agency would establish. And the contributions would be used and only used to do one of five things: pay officers and deputies more, hire more officers or deputies, provide more training for officers and deputies, purchase, maintain, or improve equipment used by officers and deputies. And number five is to set up or maintain a co-responder model program that is dedicated to addressing behavioral health calls. I'm excited about all of these areas that the money can be used for, but I'm particularly excited about the co-responder model. That's where if you have a mental health crisis, then law enforcement at their option, it's not a mandate that they do this, but they can partner with a mental health professional and have them ride along with them to hopefully de-escalate the situation and save injury or lives and get that person to the right treatment. Later in the session, I don't know what committee it will go to, but there'll be a companion bill, Senate Bill 403, that will establish a statewide framework for this co-responder model. But again, that is not mandated on the law enforcement agency. That is optional. So this tax credit program is capped at $100 million statewide. Each foundation will only be able to receive a maximum of $5 million. And the maximum a taxpayer can donate and get a dollar for dollar state income tax credit is $5,000 for an individual or $10,000 for a married couple. A member of a LLC or partnership or can give $10,000, and corporations that I guess is pass-through income, have pass-through income and have a state income tax liability can give up to 75% of their state tax liability. I think this committee is probably quite familiar with the rural hospital tax credit program. So it works very similar to that, in that If you like, let's say I want to donate to the Houston County Sheriff's Office Foundation, if they set one up, then I could donate up, my wife and I could donate up to $10,000 to that foundation, and we would receive a dollar for dollar state tax credit. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go through the bill line by line if you'd like me to. I don't know if y'all have had time to read it, but lines 16 through 14 are definitions. It defines the law enforcement foundation, defines law enforcement unit, defines qualified contributions. Lines 34 through 42 define what a qualified expenditure by the law enforcement foundation is and what they can spend the money on. And I already listed those 5 items or categories. Line 43 through 45 recognize what a qualified law enforcement foundation is and sets up the Department of Revenue to certify those foundations. Lines 46 through 48 caps the program at $100 million a year. So the maximum fiscal impact of the state would be $100 million per year. And it caps each amount that a individual foundation can receive at $5 million per year. And the concept there is we don't want, like I think the Atlanta Police Foundation is here with us today. I believe they're going to testify, and we certainly are glad they're here in support of this bill, but we don't, from my perspective anyway, where I live, I don't want the Atlanta Police Foundation to get all 100 million. So they could get 5 million, and hopefully it'll be spread out throughout the state. Lines 49 through 69 set out the limits for the individual tax payer, how much they can contribute and the maximum credit they can get. Then lines 70 through 81 requires the Department of Revenue to set up a web page for the Less Crime program that provides all the necessary information on qualified law enforcement foundations to give taxpayers the information they need as to how to donate to this program and take advantage of it. Lines 82 through 85 require the Department of Revenue to certify a law enforcement foundation upon its application and agree to comply with legal requirements, their agreement to comply with legal requirements. Lines 86 through 102 sets out the timelines for taxpayers to notify the Department of Revenue of their intent to make a contribution, DOR's approval, and for the taxpayer to make the contribution. The taxpayers must notify them of the amount they intend to contribute. Within 30 days of being notified, the Department of Revenue must pre-approve, deny, or prorate the amount based on whether or not the cap's been met. And it's done on a first come, first served basis. And then within 60 days of the pre-approval, the taxpayer must send in their contribution to the law enforcement foundation. Lines 103 through 118 require the law enforcement foundation to give a confirmation letter to the taxpayer for the amount the taxpayer contributed to be attached to the taxpayer's return at tax time. It also gives the Department of Revenue Commissioner the authority to request copies of the confirmation letters at any time. Then lines 119 through 141 set out the reporting requirements for law enforcement foundation that receive the contributions and makes it clear that they must submit a IRS Form 990 and its attachments or similar form as determined by the Department of Revenue Commissioner. Additionally, these foundations must submit a report detailing total amounts received by individual and corporate filers, total amounts used on qualified expenditures, dollar amounts contributed by contributor name. Contributors and their specific dollar amounts provided are protected by the Department of Revenue as confidential taxpayer information. This is the purpose of that is to avoid any appearance or actual conflict of interest. In other words, it's not a sort of like you're paying you're contributing, so you're not going to get a speeding ticket, that kind of issue. And the Department of Revenue still has access to all this information and is subject to current state and federal law governing state and federal tax investigations and audits. Lines 142 through 147 require law enforcement foundations to post or make available upon request its affiliated enforcement unit's annual budget. 148 to 160 prohibit taxpayers from directing their funds for a specific purpose or individual. It forbids contributions from contractors of the foundation or contractors of the law enforcement unit. Any law enforcement foundation violating these or promising a direct benefit to a taxpayer will be removed from the program and unable to rejoin for at least 2 years. 161 through 180 provide further enforcement measures on qualified law enforcement foundations. A foundation that fails to comply with the requirements found throughout the Less Crime program will have 90 days to get into compliance or be removed. Any funds that are not yet spent would be transferred to a properly operating qualified foundation. 81 through 181 through 187 prohibits any contributions in any amount greater than the taxpayer's liability. So you can't roll this money forward if you only have a $5,000 state income tax liability. You would only be able to contribute $5,000. Lines 188 through 189 require that the Department of Revenue Commissioner make the rules and implement this program. So I'm real excited about it. I think it's going to take some education on our part with the sheriffs and local law enforcement, but I think this could really be an answer to what they've been looking for additional resources. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you for the thorough discussion. I should point out too, line 188, when you talked about the DOR that will promulgate rules, we've got a couple of promulgators on Zoom here. They love to promulgate, but they're not necessarily here to answer any questions, just to be a resource if we were to need them. It was a great, thorough discussion of this bill. And I also got a note too, we do have to move on, but our two senators running for the Department of Labor are right here next to each other in bipartisan spirit. The two on the committee that are running for lieutenant governor, neither one could be here today, or I think we'd make them sit together as well. So, but they were both unable to attend. So Senator Gooch, are you, what number are you? 4, okay.
Couple questions, and I'm not running for the Department of Labor or Revenue or Sheriff or anything. No, never. Senator, good bill, good explanation. So correct me if I'm wrong. If I owe $10,000 to the Department of Revenue next year, I could write a check to a local law enforcement foundation and not pay anything to the state for that year's tax obligation?
If we pass this legislation and you comply with all the rules contained therein, yes, that's correct. It'd be $5,000 for you is the cap, and then $5,000 for your spouse. So if you file jointly, $10,000, yes.
And how many law enforcement?
So you can redirect, basically you're redirecting your tax dollars to support law enforcement.
Thank you. How many law enforcement foundations are in existence today in Georgia?
I don't have that information. There are some. I know the Atlanta Police Foundation is here today to testify. Somebody
there'll be a
else.
couple hundred after this bill goes into effect.
The-
Be a good tool. But my next question may go toward our in-house CPA. How does this impact my federal tax obligation? If I give this $10,000 gift to a local sheriff foundation, does it have any impact on my obligation on federal taxes?
As far as I know, it's if you handle it, just say where the gold credit is and that's a private school credit, so you not get any capital deduction on the federal.
Okay,
It'd be $1 for $1 on the state level.
gotcha.
As opposed to-
Wait a minute, let me put you on mic. What's your number? I didn't do that. Okay.
As opposed to the rural hospital tax credit, which is this is pattern out there, is a great credit too, that you will get a $1 for $1 on the Georgia, but you also get a possibility of a tax deduction on the federal. But this is
Can I ask
pattern
one
out
last
there.
question?
Okay.
Can you tell us where you got this great idea from, Senator Walker.
I'm happy to.
This is a great idea. We commend you for coming up with the brilliance.
I'm happy to give credit where credit is due, and all the credit goes to our fabulous Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan for this.
All right.
But getting back, Mr. Chairman Gooch, the Majority Leader Gooch. Majority Whip.
Majority
Gooch.
Whip.
What's your name again? So this would hopefully that we will have a lot of different foundations set up. And the reason it's structured the way it is that 100% of the donations will go toward support of law enforcement. There won't be any foundation getting a percentage or any one foundation monopolizing all the money. It's set up that way intentionally to where hopefully it'll be spread out throughout the state.
All right, our Vice Chair Albers had a question here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Chairman Walker, for bringing this forward, and certainly to the Lieutenant Governor for this great bill and vision. Actually, I'm going to answer part of the Majority Whip's question. There are a lot of foundations already involved. In fact, very briefly, Dave Wilkinson met with a group of us 18 years ago, and through his model, we started one in Alpharetta. And then we started one in Johns Creek and in Milton and Woodstock, and then Smyrna started one, and we have one in Roswell and Sandy Springs. We actually took that model and playbook, and now it's pretty much all over the metro area. So these foundations already do exist today. And I want you to know, being one of the founder of many of those foundations, and my wife and I have one called the Second Alarm Foundation, which helps all rural Georgia that doesn't have those today. This bill will be such a huge difference in their communities. And there's evidence that already. Now taking this to the next level, I can't even describe to you from the personal perspective of what it's going to mean to each one of those communities. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Albers. You know, our law enforcement, we thank them all the time and we appreciate them, but they are under a tremendous amount of pressure and put their lives on the line every day. And this is a way for us to put our money where our mouth is, to show them from the pocketbook some appreciation. Chairman Albers, since you have experience setting up these foundations, do you mind to speak to how difficult that is? What is it, a real headache administratively, or is it fairly straightforward?
It's actually a very straightforward process, and our foundation has all the information you need. We literally give them a whole set of digital files and playbook for everything to file for their 501c3, which is a very straightforward process. It's sample bylaws. It's everything that they would need to literally get started within about 30 days. And then what we did over the years to have them continue to grow and get their footprint out in the community more.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I did want to note, as had been noted, the Lieutenant Governor's involvement in this, and this is my 10th year here in the Senate. I don't think I've ever had a Lieutenant Governor that was actually in a committee meeting for a presentation. So this is a little bit of a historic moment for me anyway, but I do want you to address this committee if you would. And we've got 4 people signed up to speak, but if you think right now would be an appropriate time, we'd like to have you do that.
A while since I've been in this committee room as a speaker. Chairman Walker, thanks for your comments and thanks for your presentation. Certainly, this is an alternative way to approach a bipartisan problem, and it's a bipartisan solution. I'm proud of the folks that have signed up and co-signed this legislation. And certainly, this is a way to empower communities to be a part of the solution for a problem that's not just an Atlanta problem. It's all over the country. And I think it empowers individuals and corporations to participate in their own communities. And that's certainly the spirit of this. And so Chairman Albers, thanks for your insight as to founding, the foundations. When we first came up with the idea, Dave Wilkinson with the Atlanta Police Foundation helped shape the understanding of how important those foundations are to create that insulation between the actual law enforcement agency and the taxpayer. And I think it's an important piece of insulation that allows there to be all the certainty in the world that those dollars are being spent for the exact reasons that they were intended to. And so my goal is to take all the partisanship out of all the crime angles that we've seen, unfortunately, arrive around the country, and just give us all as Democrats and Republicans an opportunity to participate in making our neighborhood safer across the state. So appreciate the work of the community, the committee.
All right, thank you. Any questions from anybody? Oh, do you have a question?
I did, Mr. Chairman, but the Lieutenant Governor explained it.
Okay, okay. Yes, so you're number 9, is it?
Yeah, I'd like to say just a couple of quick things. First of all, I am so pleased with our administration, and it's I guess a more of a comment situation that I've thought for many, many years the two groups of people that were most left out in our state was public safety people and teachers. And we have done a great job, as I've seen the last several years, addressing both of those different groups of people, and I'm very proud of that. Senator Walker, I actually talked to 2 different sheriffs this morning that have foundations set up, and there is going to need to be some education about it, because there is confusion about the contribution versus the tax credit, and I've tried to walk them through it and also, but they're very excited, see a lot of potential. And probably we got, in our district, out of 6 counties, we probably got at least 5 foundations, city police foundations and or sheriff foundation that will be able to use this. So I'm very excited about it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that perspective, and obviously you're a CPA, and I don't even try to play one on TV.
Yeah.
So it is important that the CPA community is the one that educates, and so that's what we've seen with the rural hospital tax credit, as they're the go-to both with tax strategy throughout the course of the year with their clients, but then also being able to answer those questions. Going back to something you answered earlier for Majority Whip Gooch, I believe the way that works is when the SALT deduction at the federal level was eliminated, then so did the federal deduction side. So even the rural hospital tax credit no longer gets a federal deduction, as I understand it, because of the SALT deduction has gone away. But you're shaking your head no, so you may know more. You do know more about the CPA.
If the deduction is made through a business and you can justify that as a part of your business, it's important for that hospital to stay open, then you can take it as a business deduction.
Do you have a business card? I might need to switch CPAs. That was pretty good.
In fact,
Yeah.
I do.
That's right.
All right, any other questions, Senator Orrock?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been familiar for some years with the work of our Atlanta Police Foundation, and it really is a model, in my opinion, under Dave Wilkinson's long leadership, the founder of the initiative. A question that came up with the Rural Hospital Initiative that I think it would be a question here as well, and that is some hospitals or some police foundations could be, fabulously rewarded. In other words, have a good forward face to the community and do outreach and be very successful in drawing funds, and others that are earlier in their cycle and starting up. And also, depending on where you live in the state, there's a lot more money in some parts of the state than others. And so the one, if you will, downside, or something that there may be a cure for, is how to build for success across the whole landscape, as opposed to having some benefit mightily from it and others kind of be left in the shadow just because of where they're located, or a number of elements. In other words, it's not fully funding everybody out of a pot. There's a certain randomness to it, and I know we've seen that with the hospitals as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah,
on that,
certainly appreciate the
Governor.
question. And it's something that I thought about and envisioned at the early stages of drafting the rural hospital tax credit. And then I think we've really seen this play out well. I always wanted an element of accountability to the receiver of the tax credit, right? So if we look through the lens of the rural hospitals, I wanted to make sure that they were actively engaging their communities, they were actively educating their communities, reaching out, but then also the level of accountability. I wanted that community to build a layer of trust with them as to them spending those dollars in their community. So in a hospital's format, were they actually buying new equipment that better served the health needs of that community? Were they adding mental health portions to their hospital? Were they taking better care of OBGYN services? And if that community felt satisfied, then they would continue to contribute. in the law enforcement angle also, I want to make sure that the community continues to build trust and there's a relationship that continues to build. So in my community of Forsyth County, I look forward to writing a contribution to the foundation in Forsyth County, and I'm going to hold them accountable as a taxpayer up there. I'm going to make sure that they are taking better care of police officers. I'm going to look at turnover rates, making sure they're able to keep and maintain those law enforcement officers. Is their equipment up to date? Is their training up to speed? Are they weaving in that co-responder model? So there is a level of accountability, and not every community is going to achieve it at peak performance. We certainly hope they do, but it certainly is an opportunity for them to continue to put on display their best and brightest.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other questions, we appreciate you being here.
Thank
Honored
you
to have
for
here.
your consideration.
And we have four other people to talk before. I forgot to do this last meeting, so I don't remember now, but Kaylee Maxwell is our new Senate research person. When you see both bills, you see a summary from Senate research on here. Ben Line has been working with her, but he's kind of shifting to some other areas. I think he likes other things to do better than finance. I don't know, but he's moving away. And also one of the two up there on zooming in, John Foster, is about to retire after decades with the Department of Revenue. The IRC updates that we do where we match to the federal code, he does all the dirty work on that and brings it forward. If you remember, we did that in November during special session, so we wouldn't have to do a big one now. We do have a couple of tiny things to bring forward later on, but he's done a tremendous job in making sure that Georgia is ready for the changes that the federal government throws on us, and that we get the information out to the software companies and everybody else to make sure we've got accurate information. So we're certainly going to miss him when he leaves here. We've got 4 people signed up. I know we've got Pam Parrish from Connection Homes. That's the next bill? Okay, it's got that number on there. I looked at that wrong then. 370, because those are marked 361. Yeah. Okay. And then we've got Dave Wilkinson, I know, from the Atlanta Police Foundation, if you'd like to address us. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a great day in Atlanta. I really
Okay.
appreciate you all bringing this legislation forward. I like to use the term sometimes this is a game changer, and I especially want to thank Senator Walker for bringing it forward, and certainly for the outstanding leadership of our Lieutenant Governor for coming up with this idea. I run the Atlanta Police Foundation. It is seen far and wide as sort of the largest and most successful police foundation even in the United States. And I think I say that to say that is, I think, a credit to the philanthropic spirit of Georgians to support public safety as a whole. Obviously, you would know it sometimes in the last couple of years or so what's gone on, but generally speaking, Georgians have come out in a big way to support public safety, and that's what made the Atlanta Police Foundation so successful. I'm the former head of the U.S. Secret Service here in Georgia, and now run this police foundation, and very proud of what we accomplish. One of the things I wanted to mention, I think that's incredibly important right now for the committee to talk about, is the obvious, and that is a bill like this passing and this measure moving forward creates the necessary resources for the police agencies to make their communities safer. That's pretty obvious. But think about the message this sends to every police officer across the state of Georgia of how we support them, how you support them, and how the profession of being a law enforcement officer is a profession worth having. Right. And I can promise you that's been our biggest challenge in this crime wave in the last 2 years, is officers questioning whether this is a profession they still want to be part of based on the, attacks they've seen, that sort of thing. And so the message from this, I think, equally is important. The last thing I would say about it, I think that's also extremely important, is this, that having run a police foundation now for the last 16 years or so, I can tell you that the corporations, the large philanthropic foundations, they quickly get how to spend their money for the public good, and that may be through the police foundation or some other nonprofit. Individuals have a more difficult time figuring that out, right? How many folks do you all know in your neighborhoods that say, I would love to support the police. I'm behind the police. I want to support them in a big way. But most of them don't really know how to do that. Right. And this offers them a real opportunity to do that, a very tangible way to say, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, as they say, to support our law enforcement agencies. So I could tell you this is a game changer. We've lost about 400 police officers in the last 2 years in Atlanta. Arrest numbers went down dramatically over a time frame there. And you all know that ultimately, if you take away the confidence of the law enforcement profession, then the city is going to suffer to a certain degree. And I believe we've turned the corner to a certain degree with that. See a lot of those crime numbers starting to come down, a lot of the arrest numbers starting to go up, a lot of that. A lot of the police reform training is in full swing. I'm very proud of that. The Police Foundation spends a lot of funds and resources working with organizations like the National Center for Civil and Human Rights to bring about de-escalation training and racial sensitivity and implicit bias training. So all of that is happening in the state. And we need to take a moment to applaud these officers and these police agencies for embracing that 21st century policing paradigm, which is basically a code for police reform, and really making sure our police officers are doing it right, while at the same time support them. And one of the things I often say, and then I'll open it for questions, is that we've got to remind everyone that you have to support the police while at the same time holding them accountable. And those things, so those two things are certainly not mutually exclusive. So I think a bill like this speaks to all of that. It gives citizens the opportunity to get behind the police in a very tangible way. And I could not be more excited about this. And I think it'll have tremendous impact across the state of Georgia. And as my good friend, Senator Albers said, it was setting up these police foundations is fairly straightforward. Police foundations put together a packet of exactly how to do that. We'd be happy to sort of set up a little bit of a sort of clearinghouse or whatever the term would be to help all the foundations or these organizations across the state create this 501c3 nonprofit to then raise these funds. And a lot of the requirements, such as the 990 being filed and all that, is written in the 501c3 requirements, I believe, already. So I think it's all very workable. It's all very doable. And I think it'd be very impactful.
All right. We certainly appreciate your testimony and being here and the work you do on this. Sure.
I don't want to get into the weeds, but
I think it is. You're 3 or 4?
I can use 3. So real quickly, can you make brief comments on how let's say a small town police department or a small town sheriff's department wanted to utilize this, and I think they will. I think it's a great opportunity. What kind of oversight and governance should be on these nonprofits? Should the sheriff or should the police chief have any input or any involvement? How do you guarantee that to occur?
The way I typically recommend it and the way the Atlanta Police Foundation is set up, you would get a community board made of business leaders and community leaders that would serve totally as the governance.
Okay.
The chief or the sheriff in some cases would serve in an ex officio manner on the board, but they would have no control of the budget. They would have no control of the spending. So it would be effectively the chief coming to the committee asking for a grant to fund a certain thing, but it would be a diverse group of community members that would decide how that money's actually spent. Now, these are all folks that are there to support police. Don't get me wrong, right? They're all there for the express mission of creating a safer community. So that is the way it's done in Atlanta Police Foundation, typically the way we recommend it across the board. And it works extremely well, and it works in the advantage of the chief as well, because ultimately he's got all this support, and the fact that these folks have unanimously, or most cases, voted to approve those funds, and he did not have a vote, so to speak.
And I'm assuming the same would apply for local school districts who have their own police departments now. They could also apply for the funding. Would that be fair to say?
I'm assuming that's in the bill. I would have to read the bill again, but yes, I believe that apply to anyone that has a
Certified
police law enforcement jurisdiction.
Appreciate
But we're
it.
happy to help in setting up any foundations or working through that across the state if we can.
All right. Seeing no other questions, we appreciate your testimony.
My pleasure.
Is Terry Norris here? I didn't know. I've got him signed up. There he is. He was,
Lieutenant Governor caught me leaving, so I had to stay.
yeah, he was in our retirement meeting at 2:00, so we're keeping him busy today.
Yes, thank you for having me again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lieutenant Governor. A little bit of history about me. I'm Terry Norris. I'm Executive Director of the Sheriff's Association. And I deal with the 159 elected sheriffs every day. I can say that 4 or 5 times a week, I'm hearing from a sheriff who cannot hire anybody at all. Nobody. We have jailers in our state making $9 an hour. And we are trying in those counties to encourage the commission to increase those salary and benefits. I will say this, in 2016, Governor Deal came forward, stepped forward. You all helped, those of you that were here. You all helped to provide additional salaries for certain state officers. The sheriffs were not opposed to that, but it was a bittersweet pill for them and the chiefs. And I'm not trying to speak for the chiefs today, but it happened for them too. What that did was expand the variance between most local officers and state officers. So in many cases, county governing authorities and sheriffs got together, and in many counties, there was some additional salaries provided for those sheriff's office employees. The PDs, I suspect the same thing occurred. So I want to say today that this body, your state senate, at that time created a series of meetings to talk about the local problem. You all know this too. Our local officers far outnumber state officers. Our local officers are the first ones on the scene. They are the first responders. As much as we need the State Patrol, the GBI, DNR, and others, generally speaking, you're going to have, you call 911, almost exclusively, you're going to get a local police officer or a deputy sheriff. Unfortunately, I'll say this, because of that, not to imply that state officers' jobs are not very dangerous, they are. But unfortunately, when we see the line of duty deaths every year throughout this country, they are predominantly local officers, predominantly local officers. In our state and in most states, every state, I suppose, local officers are paid locally. In our case with the sheriffs are not departments of county government. They're an office, constitutional office. The sheriff is independent of the county governing authority. However, the way our framework, budget framework is set up, the county commission must fund the office of sheriff. So we have a little bit different dynamic, sheriffs do, than do police chiefs and others. But this Senate back in 17 helped us by promoting conversation statewide, and it helped. So I guess I'm here today to, first of all, thank the Senate. Jeff Duncan, my friend, when he was on that other side, was that other side you were? Yeah, you were on that other side as well. He's been a friend a long time. And Jeff, thank you for that call last spring when you mentioned this concept. So there are a few things that I've spoken to Senator Walker about. I don't know the details of that. We look forward to working to improve this bill to ensure that the local, for us, the local dynamics, the local budget dynamics are so different. We look forward to trying to maybe tweak this a little bit so that if a sheriff sets up a foundation, then those funds can smoothly move into that budget. So thank you to the Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, committee members. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, I don't see any questions.
Hearing none, I'm gone.
Thank you for that. All right, I think that ends everybody that's signed up on this bill, so we can entertain a motion or discussion.
Move you pass, Mr. Chairman.
We've got a motion from Senator Albers, Vice Chair, and I got 3 seconds over there. I think the first one was Bruce Thompson. He beat the other DOL candidate, got his hand up first. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none opposed, it passes unanimously. Thank you all for being here, and we will move on to the next bill that one of our committee members is carrying Senator Kauser. If you want to get up to the podium, or you can, wherever you feel comfortable at.
To bring you the Fostering Success Act. It's one of the Lieutenant Governor's legislative packages this year, and that's why he's here. I'm extremely pleased that he is here in person to speak to the bill briefly, and then I'm going to go through all the details. This is a wonderful initiative to try to assist with our aged out foster youth who have not been adopted. And that term in the bill will include children that are 16 to 18 years old that are still in foster care. And of course, you age out of foster care at age 18 unless you reach an agreement with DFACS to remain in. And some of the children are adopted as well, but this will allow services to be provided to them on up to age 21 and as late as age 25 in some circumstances. The idea is to help fund these foster child support organizations, which are charitable type organizations that are made for helping these children as they transition into the real world, so to speak, or into adulthood. It's a funding mechanism for them by giving tax credits, income tax credits to donors to these organizations. There are about 25 of them statewide now. We anticipate there could be many more because there's so many child placement agencies, somewhere 75 to 85 of those already. It's a very natural outreach or a growth of their services, but it's a tremendous initiative. And I'll turn the podium over to the Lieutenant Governor since he's taken the time to be here to give you the big picture. Then I'll come back and go through some of the details of the bill.
Thank you, Senator Kauser. I appreciate all of your efforts on this. I could get used to doing this. I forget how much I enjoy presenting in front of committees, although it was not as much fun when I was on the other side having to come into this committee room. Yeah, you do. Thank you so much for all your support and all your great questions when I was a House member. I want to first describe the problem, and I think everybody is going to be in agreement. There's not probably a person in Georgia that doesn't agree that we can do better. So just imagine you're 18 years old and your birth certificate says that you turned 18 years old today, and you're in the foster care system. So the state sees that as you've aged out of the foster care system, and because your birth certificate says it, it means that you're ready for the world. You're ready to have your own job and pay for your own roof and worry about your own health care and make tough decisions. And certainly we all know that's not necessarily the case. And so this is an opportunity for us to really lean into and wrap services around those 18-year-old kids that have unfortunately been foster kids. Nothing that they have done has created that on themselves. And so this is an opportunity for us as a state to support and be able to give them the guiding steps they'll need to have a successful life as they move forward. I want to take a couple of steps back and really kind of take you to this mindset that I've had going back to the rural hospital tax credit. Now, for our purposes here, it's called a tax credit. But in my mind, it's actually a policy credit, right? I get it. We have to legally deal with it as a tax credit, but it's really a policy credit because just imagine if you're just looking through a fiscal lens, like many of you on this committee are charged to do, if a kid is going to age out of the foster care system with really no head start, right? Over the course of that child's life that then becomes an adult, just imagine all of the services that person's going to require throughout the course of their life, whether it be unemployment, whether it be Medicaid, whether it be incarceration, whether it be just, you can name a million different services that the state would end up having to lean into throughout the course of their life. And so I see this as a policy credit. This is an early investment into a problem that the state's ultimately paying for anyways. The early parts of this policy credit notion came, my wife and I and our family go to North Point Church, and they have a program every November called Be Rich. And so what Be Rich is it's not about trying to get credit for helping those in need. It's really spends the whole year, 11 months out of the year, identifying the organizations that are best suited to tackle the big issues, right? Folks trying to transition out of prison, folks that are trying to transition through addiction, foster kids, divorced couples, all these challenging situations that just kind of arrive in life. And so we don't try to reinvent the wheel. We go find the best and brightest out there, and then we invest in them. We raise millions of dollars in November every year, and we invest in those organizations so that they can become bigger and better. And so for me, this is an opportunity for us to put a better foot forward and invest in organizations that are already doing an amazing job. We just want them to be able to do an even more amazing job. by allowing them to have these credits. Going back to this notion, I've often talked about the 4 C's: churches, charities, corporations, and citizens, right? I think the 4 C's are better at solving many of the challenges that we face in our state and in our country, right? If you're a church or a charity or a corporation or just a citizen who wants to get engaged, you bring things to the table that state government could never bring, or even the federal government for that fact. You bring things like volunteerism, you bring innovation, and you certainly bring probably the most important element, and that's an exit strategy. So as we look for opportunities to wrap these services around these kids that are 18 years old and aging out of our foster care system, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to make a huge impact in their lives. I want to read to you lines 62 through 66, just so you understand the laser focus of what these dollars are going to do in these kids' lives. So before I read this, I want you to imagine you're 18 years old, you have no family, and you're charged with having to go tackle the rest of your life. Wraparound services mean services provided directly to aging foster children to support their education through post-secondary education services, housing services, vocation services, medical services, counseling services, mentorship services, nutrition services, transportation services, or up to $150 per month in direct cash payments for use on personal necessities. Every dollar in this program is going to be laser focused on helping these kids be able to achieve the futures that we all have had. With that, I'll hand over the presentation to Senator Kauser.
Thank you, Governor. You know, it's kind of interesting. All of you know I've served on this committee for a number of years, and I have developed somewhat of a reputation as being pretty harsh on tax deductions and tax credits. My goal has always been to try to lower the overall income tax rate and quit giving out these special tax exemptions, et cetera. So Lieutenant Governor was kind of hesitant when he asked me to bring this bill, saying, I know you don't like, tax deductions and tax credits. And I said, no, really what I don't like is us putting our thumb on the scale, favoring one industry over another, rather than trying to reduce the regulations and tax levels for everybody. This is a public benefit, and it's an appropriate use of tax funds. It allows us to utilize the synergy of these private organizations. Rather than hiring more state employees, we have wonderful citizens in Georgia, many of whom have formed organizations to support these foster children. And we're simply helping fund them to provide a service to our children, and especially disadvantaged children that have been growing up in the foster home environments without their natural parents for whatever reason it might be. And to keep these kids from just being thrown out into the wild world at age 18, which we all deem to be an adult, but all of us that are parents know they're still children. They're not ready to take on the world with no family support system whatsoever. And these fantastic organizations are able to do that. Lieutenant Governor just went through some of the things that the type of services they give. We call them wraparound services, but they include everything from food, housing, transportation, education, medical expenses, vocational services to get them ready for jobs, counseling services. Some have many emotional problems that they've been through, mentoring services. When they need somebody, when they're out of the foster care system, to mentor them and guide them and lead them into the world, and as much as $150 per month for their personal necessities. This is to give these kids a fighting chance. And I think some of the other speakers will tell you the statistics are just absolutely horrifying of what happens to a large percentage of these kids. They end up with drug and alcohol problems. They drop out of school. They don't complete an education. Many become incarcerated because they lack the support that all of us that are fortunate enough to be intact nuclear families or to have been raised in those benefited from. It's hard to think what would have happened to you or me in the world if I was just thrown out there at age 18 to fend for myself. So they're fantastic organizations that help a very specific need of kids that are aging out. It's built to start as young as age 16 or 17 when they're still foster children, particularly in this vocational education and the mentoring and some of the counseling and things to get them prepared for what we all call leaving the nest as you leave. And it does it in a very precise way, as the Lieutenant Governor said, with a tax credit only to these qualified organizations. DFACS will qualify them. They have extensive reporting requirements you will note in the bill here, where they have to, if they accept these type of funds from a tax credit, they're going to have to report exactly what money they received, where it came from, and how they spent it. And the bill makes a special provision that makes these organizations spend at least 80% of the money they receive through these tax credits for those qualified services, for the wraparound services. So, and you'll find that at line 195. That's a unique provision that's meant that this money, which is really indirectly coming out of the state treasury, is to be spent on these children, on these type of services rather than administrative cost. The tax credit is limited to $2,500 per individual taxpayer, or $5,000 for a married couple. And that's for the first 6 months of the program. It has a $20 million cap. Once that amount has been reached, then the tax credits cease. If for some reason there are not 20 million in qualified tax credits made during that first 6 months, then it will open up for individuals could claim a greater tax credit. And I really don't think that we need to talk a whole lot longer to go over this, because it is so laser focused and so precise on what it does. Although I am extraordinarily happy to be able to bring this. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have. You will note in your folder proposed amendments. Let me know if you don't have them. They were, as you go through this
We're passing them out right now.
in the drafting process, we received some input from DCH that we ought to have. Just to clarify, on page 3 of your committee sub at line 50, to add after between the words funds and by, to add in made during the taxable year, just to clarify that your contribution, your credit is only if it's made during that taxable year. And then on page 8, line 200, there was just basically a typo there. We had A3C2, it should have been A4C2, and we changed it to a capital C. That was just something that in the drafting process got transposed. So I'd like to bring that amendment in my position as a member of the committee here once we discussed it, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention it this time, just a couple of clarifying factors. Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me present. I'm happy to
All right,
answer
we've
any questions.
got several questions. A couple of comments I want to make first is, we had done the foster child credit, which I believe we went up from 2,000 to 6,000. And I'd looked back at the numbers on, and you think if it's a good credit, because it's got to cost us more than $6,000 to take care of a child in the state, I would think. I don't know the exact cost, but I would guess it's a little bit north of there. And we had been a little over 14,000 children in foster care, and had looked up some of the numbers, had Senate Research look up some of the numbers, and it was below 11,000. So we made a big dent in it through that credit. And you think about it, that's 3,000 kids that have a permanent home. And I'm a dollars guy, but that hits me when you do that. And I think this is another thing. My youngest graduated from UGA last year, just started graduate school, but and she's had some friends that their family's basically like, you're on your own now. And I was actually helping out one of her friends last week, and he said, "You notice in your family, your parents are the first people you go to when there's a crisis." And it's because that's our job, is to make them successful. These kids don't have parents to make them successful. And this is a great way to give them some help during this time that, as you said, we know that 18-year-olds aren't adults. And I hope it's as successful as the last tax credit that put thousands of children in permanent homes. Senator Albers, I believe you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this great bill, Chairman Kauser, and certainly to Lieutenant Governor for bringing it forward. correct me if I'm wrong, aside from all the goodness that this provides, as Chairman Hustelli just said, for these young men and women, it's also an incredible savings back to the state, because if we do not help them, they oftentimes end up in the criminal justice system or needing assistance from society, as opposed to be able to be contributors to society. Is that not true?
Absolutely. And it is truly just horrific to see the percentage of these children that end up incarcerated or drug or alcohol addiction problems. Just it's really terrible because they have no guidance. I don't know that we've calculated the amount of savings, but there's no question it'd be a great savings to our state on expenses we would incur otherwise.
Thank you.
Senator Rock, you're number 8, is that correct?
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation and the support of the Lieutenant Governor for this measure. I guess I had a couple of questions. One is that it's very likely that the organizations that will be credentialed and qualified for this are known players already. I know Chris 180 is a group that I support with a charitable contribution, and is actually right over in DeKalb County and has a remarkable record. I mean, they would of course be part of that, but there are groups like that are out there working that the DFACS is well aware of. We're not hunting out in the wilderness for somebody to show up that might do something good. Isn't that the case? We know the players.
Absolutely.
And have the capacity to.
And these are all non-profit organizations. They're not in it for the money. They're in it because they have good hearts and want to help these children.
That's right. They're mission driven and with terrific staff that make great sacrifices to work in these nonprofits that are not able to pay that much. So that was one question, that we're not dealing with strangers here. We're dealing with folks that have been toiling in the vineyard for these children. Those are the entities that were going to be on the list. And number two, just I could pour through the whole bill and find that out, but it's much simpler to ask you to just tell us when when it begins and how it operates in terms of the taxpayer making the contribution. And
it will be 2022 tax credit on your 2022 tax return, and we have a mandate to DFACS, which will be qualifying these organizations, that they're to act. I want to say it's November. By November 1st of this year, they will have accepted and approved their first round of applications to be the certified organizations that are eligible to receive these funds.
so that's the very end of the year
Yeah.
that contributions could be made that would.
You make them anytime during the calendar year 2022 during that tax
Even
year.
before.
Once this becomes law.
That's right, but if they're not credentialed until November, well,
That's right.
they are capable of credentialing before then, in
Very
all
true.
likelihood.
Yeah, and I think these 25 or so that we already have ought to be expedited. And it's an online process, and it's not complicated to get these qualified, but they are held accountable, which is what a lot of the
Exactly.
meat of this bill does. It requires reporting, public
Yeah.
disclosure of what they receive and what they spend and how they spend it.
But a contribution made any time during this year that we are in, 2022.
That's right.
But the bill has to pass first.
That's right.
Those contributions have to occur after the bill is
Correct.
signed into
Yeah,
law.
there's no such thing as this credit until
Uh,
this committee passes it, Senate and the House, and the governor signs it. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. I will mention one other thing because I had the question asked to me earlier today. You cannot designate any specific individual to receive the wraparound services. You can
Right.
designate which of the qualified organizations you give it to,
Sure.
but you can't tie it to a particular kid.
All right. Senator Jackson, I believe, had a question or comment too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, do you know how many people leave the foster care system every year?
It's between 500 and 1,000 children.
500,000.
Yeah, between 500 and 1,000 each year.
And another question, currently, and I know we're not doing enough, but are we doing anything for these young people now that leave the system?
We are, we passed a bill, I think it was just a year or two ago on the technical college education being free. I don't think that's been funded yet. But we are trying to make it so it was 2021. Senate Bill 107 gave free access to the technical college system for these aged out children from foster care. It's premised on support being in the budget, and I hadn't checked this year's budget, but and we know that the Board of Regents is also in the process, we hope, of establishing a program for free tuition for these children at their whatever university system institution they can get into.
Okay.
Now, those are the two things that come to mind, because that's what we got to do. We got to get them into adulthood. We have to get them educated and trained vocationally so that they can provide for themselves and their families.
Right. I know firsthand this really works, and we need to do it. In a previous life, I was an officer on the Navy ship, the USS Iwo Jima, and my dental tech at the time, I told him, where's he going home for Christmas? We gotta take the Christmas break. And everyone was leaving the ship, and he said he didn't have anywhere to go. He said he was going to spend his Christmas just like he spent his Thanksgiving aboard ship. So I invited him to my home to hang out. And I said, you can bring any other friends, because he told me he was in the foster care system and he didn't have anywhere to go. I said, well, if there's anybody else on the ship who didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas, you can invite him over to my house and I'll cater dinner. He brought 8 people. He brought 8 more people with him. And they all were foster care young people that joined the Navy that didn't have anywhere else to go. They joined the Navy because they didn't have anywhere to call home. And and all of them said the Navy is their parents now, and it's their home. So it's amazing. In that little small ship, there were 9 people that didn't have anywhere that they could call home, that they can go celebrate Christmas or celebrate anything else. So it's a real problem, and most of them needed help. And fortunately for them, the Navy gave them a lot of that services, a lot of what you're doing now, the wraparound services, Lieutenant Governor. They had social programs to go to. They had somebody helping with their finances, but also the Navy also gave them housing and all the other stuff. So thank you for bringing this for us, Governor. We certainly need it. Thank you, Mr.
All right. Yeah, we're going to have to get going because I don't want to lose a quorum here, but go ahead quickly.
I just want to add, but when you were talking about the pathway to higher education, post-secondary education, critically important. And in light of our workforce needs as a state, we need all of these young people moving into productive lives and giving them education. And it was staggering when I learned that without these kinds of supports that we're trying to put in place, 3% of foster care kids get a bachelor's degree, graduate from a 4-year college. 3% of the people in that universe. So we have work to do, and this is a great step forward.
Thank you.
All right. I've got a couple of people signed up to speak if there's not anything else pressing. Well, quickly, Senator Payne over here. What number are you? Okay.
Yes, sir, if you don't mind. I've been trying to get.
Yeah, the buttons don't work if you try to.
Oh, they don't work.
They don't work.
Number 10.
It's on.
My question was, and I think this is just, I can't emphasize after what I did for 30 years, what a change this is going to bring, but I just questioning and just run through my mind and thinking about, what this is going to mean and what's going to help for foster kids. Has there been any consideration for those, because those kids that are not necessarily foster kids, but they are committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice as juveniles, but then they can go past 18 as juveniles, still committed to Department of Juvenile Justice, but when they get out of the YDC that they're in, and they can be committed as juvenile up to their 21st birthday. So has there been any consideration of having something in this, going forward, having something in there for those kids that are coming out of placement, because those are kids are just as much as a lot of those kids, even though they're adult age, and the fact that they're committed as juveniles in the criminal system, they still have no place to go to after oftentimes when they get out.
They were incarcerated rather than in a foster home, basically.
Right.
Senator, there hasn't been, but that's a brilliant idea. And you're pointing out one of the advantages of a citizen legislator from your past as a juvenile probation officer, whatever your official title was. You spent many years helping those children, and I'd be happy to work with you to try to see if there's language we could do to implement that. I don't think you and I could do this on the fly today. Obviously, as a finance bill, this will come out engrossed, but if there are changes made in the House and this comes back over in an agree-disagree posture, would be a perfect place to put that in, or as a separate bill. And I look forward to working with you and addressing that. That's the same problem, just a different segment of the population.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that. We've got, I think, no more questions, so we appreciate the testimony, and shortly be ready to hear some, offer some amendments and then a motion as well. Pam Parrish was on Connection Homes. I had the numbers reversed, so you're on this one. Tell us who you are, the group Connection Homes you're with, and all that information.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Lieutenant Governor Duncan, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Senator Kauser, thank you for carrying this legislation. My name is Pam Parrish. I'm the founder and CEO of Connections Homes. We're an organization that started here in Georgia 8 years ago to work specifically with this population of youth that are 18 to 24 that are aging out of foster care without families. And through our work, we match them to mentoring families who make a commitment to be a part of their life for life. It's a lifelong commitment of someone who's just going to come alongside them and help them navigate the rocky road to adulthood that we've all been discussing here today. In addition to that, I'm also a mom. I'm a mom to 8 young adult daughters. They're all in their 20s. 7 of them came to us through foster care and adoption, 5 after the age of 18. So I don't just run an organization that works with this population. They call me mom. And I can tell you that these kids that are raised in the Georgia foster care system and through no fault of their own end up aging out without a support system, they're not set up for the same successes that you and I may have been when we were raised and 18 and out into the world. They don't even, I was in a conversation with someone yesterday about their teenager, and they were considering college and the cost of doing whatever they needed to do. Well, they had the option of staying home and going to community college to get those first couple of critical years behind them without having the burden of survival on them for room, rent, food, transportation, and all of those things. Well, these kids don't have that. And I think what this legislation and this bill does so well is help to provide those wraparound services, the people who will come alongside them to help them make the decisions or fix the flat tire or decide what classes to take, or just the ability to help have somewhere to live. If you look at a kid, SB 107, which we were just talking about earlier, to provide the technical school. Well, you have a young person who ages out of foster care and they can go to technical school for free. That's great, but technical schools don't provide room and board and dorms. So that young person has a burden of survival of about $22,000 a year. To survive. So they have to make about $30,000 a year in order to go to school and live. And what we see with we've served over 220 kids in this population in Georgia, and we see them every day having to make a decision between going to school or putting food on their table because they don't have the parents to go home to. So I just want to encourage this committee, as you're looking at this bill, to just think about yourselves and what it took for you to navigate into adulthood, and how many times you called grandma, aunt, or whoever, mom and dad, to help you out. And these kids don't have that. And this is one way for our community to get involved with organizations like Connections Homes. One of our partners is Chris 180, with organizations that do great work to help these kids become a success and not a statistic. And I can actually give you a couple of the statistics that we've talked about today. 71% of girls who age out of foster care without someone in their life are going to end up pregnant in the first year. And statistics tell us that about 50% of those kids are going to have interaction with the child welfare system. So this isn't just preventing the cost of incarceration, which 87% of boys are going to have some interaction with the law aging out of foster care. This is also stopping the generational cycle of our child welfare system to reduce those numbers even more, from 14 to less than 11 down even further, because we're helping these kids to launch out and have support around them.
All right. We appreciate your insight and testimony on those statistics. Thanks for being here. Don't see anybody that has any questions or comments. We've got Kim Jones here. Did you have a question? I'm sorry. Okay. I just saw the pen up. Wanted to be sure.
Chairman, committee, thank you so much for being here. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for bringing this forward. Kim Jones, Executive Director of NAMI Georgia. I'm smart enough to know not to keep you guys from voting, especially at 4 o'clock on this afternoon. So I'm going to get to it. This is the year for mental health. We actually support SB 361. I forgot to write down on that. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and those. Senator Kauser, this is a bill that we support, and it works. And for those who experience mental health problems, these wraparound services are needed so much to make it successful. So thank you very much.
We appreciate your testimony and being concise. I think we're ready for a motion. Let's see, we do the amendments first. Is that either way? Doesn't matter. Okay. So, well, let's just have a motion then. If anybody's got a motion on the bill itself. We've got a motion from Senator Orrick, a second, from Senator Albers, and a second from Senator Orrick on the bill. And then does anybody want to offer some amendments to it?
Chairman, I would offer, I would just call it amendment 1, page 3, line 50 of the committee sub. After the word funds, I'd like to insert the words made during the taxable year.
Okay.
That's just a clarification.
All right.
And I'll go ahead and state my second amendment, or they can be combined on page 8 at line 200. And this was just our identifying the section division A3C2 should be instead be replaced with A4C2. Capital C, yeah.
All right. We've got a motion to amend it as stated. I would think we're okay with one amendment on that, aren't we? So we've got a second from Senator Albers on the amendment. So no discussion. All in favor of amending the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. So now back to the motion itself. If no other discussion, all in favor of the full motion, the full bill is presented with as amended. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Passes unanimously. We appreciate everybody being here and y'all's good work on this. Meeting adjourned.